Culture shock is a common phrase heard when traveling abroad, from being in awe in the differences of the culture you are visiting to the major frustrations of navigating it. Culture shock can explain many scenarios travelers often bump into. However, it's much more complex than how we hear about it from peers and from the internet, especially when it comes to college students. Let's discuss the roadblocks foreign exchange students face when traveling abroad. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Tolles, and this is Culture Shock, a guide for college students, the inquiry project for my Communicating Mindfully course in my Master's of Communication program at Queen's University of Charlotte. Previously, we discussed how the holiday film Elf provided examples of culture shock. The movie is about Buddy the Elf, a human raised in the North Pole, discovering his true lineage as a human and then going to New York City to meet his father. He experiences several instances of culture shock due to his lack of knowledge of transportation, poor American mannerisms, poor office etiquette, and many other first world aspects he grew up without needing, being raised by elves. Now, we are talking about the more subtle experiences of culture shock, mostly affecting international students in the United States. When I was in my undergraduate program, I applied to help a Japanese international student with his English studies. However, we came across many communication problems due to the confusion I experienced from how he carried himself due to his culture. He was also confused about many aspects of US culture that I was aware of, despite that he was near fluent in English. And I was not the only one. Many of my peers also struggled to build relationships with their international partners due to this culture shock. I have developed a solution to combat this communication ethics problem and prevent interpersonal communication from falling apart between persons of different cultures in the future. The best way to describe culture shock in the beginning is with its four stages: honeymoon, frustration, adjustment, and acceptance. Many vacations abroad primarily last within the honeymoon phase because they are short. Culture shock in general can actually be a month-long process or even a year-long process. Here's why it affects international students so negatively. Most students, especially those who are studying at my school, are only there for a semester, meaning they couldn't make it to the adjustment and acceptance stages of culture shock. The frustration stage not only interfered with the relationship building with their American mentors, but they continued to struggle in class because of it. This is due to feelings of anxiety from cultural differences, which scholar Ernest Beck claims is something people actively try to avoid. This is more common than you think. When researching the phenomenon of culture shock, I found two cases in which the frustration stage interfered with the studies of scholars. Dr. Lin Chi Ning Chang came to the US from Taiwan to study in her doctorate in English Studies. She documented many instances where US culture got in the way of her relationship building. For example, she couldn't find a way to communicate in class, and conversing with Americans confused her because of their greetings and mannerisms. She decided to stay silent until she found her way into the adjustment stage of culture shock. Another scholar, Professor Janet McManus, traveled to Puerto Rico from Canada to teach. She did extensive research before landing in the territory. She learned about the city she was going to, the school, and even asked about her students. However, she was not prepared for the classroom culture, which included constant interruptions, from alarms to being told to go home for the day when arriving on campus. She admits this put her behind on her semester goals, keeping her frustrated in the classroom, all while the students were able to take it all in stride. She, too, decided to work as she went along until eventually finding herself in the adjustment stage of culture shock. The problem with these cases is that the stays in their host countries lasted much longer than a semester, and international students at my alma mater only have about 4 months, which is equivalent to a semester, to get used to US culture. However, I have a recommendation that would prepare international students to the point that their entire stay in the US would be in the adjustment and acceptance stages of culture shock. Schools in these students' home countries should create a program that emulates the culture of the country they are going to. These students would spend months at home living like Americans or whoever else they're going to be visiting, learning about the pop culture, the food, the slang, and speaking in about as much of their native language as they can. The simulation gives these students the experience of the frustration stage before they even land in the country they're going to. This way, students will not experience anxiety induced rhetorical interruptions when they arrive for their studies. And rhetorical interruptions are defined by Arnett, Bell, and Hart and Fritz as disruptive factors calling our sense of home into question. Opponents of this recommendation will likely say it's too costly or too overly productive for just a semester's worth of study. However, it is that kind of over preparation that will help students succeed while abroad. By not exposing these students to the cultures of their host countries before they leave abroad, you risk failing grades, poor interpersonal communication, and failure at relationship building. It has already happened before at my alma mater, and it will continue to happen unless we better prepare our students for the world outside their country's borders. In the future, schools should survey students who show interest in studying abroad. They must be taught the dangers of culture shock while abroad and when it comes to communication ethics. The same schools should test their knowledge of the countries they want to go to before applying to any programs. From there, those students should be referred to any courses they can take to be up to par to participate in any preparation programs. Universities should also keep in contact with students who have already studied abroad. Their personal testimonies of culture shock will help the schools at home further develop their programs and better prepare future students for studying abroad. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation on culture shock among college students. I hope I was able to teach you something about the process of culture shock so that you may be more wary yourself on your next experience while abroad. This is Kevin Tolles, signing out.